Michelle, a 20-year-old female, is seeking feedback on a complex family situation. Her older sister, Emily, age 25, was set to marry Jonathan, also 25. Their relationship seemed perfect, and they were viewed as an ideal couple who had been together for an extended period. However, a peculiar and unexpected twist has occurred, jeopardizing their wedding. Emily has forbidden Michelle from attending the wedding, and consequently, Jonathan is now refusing to proceed with the marriage. Emily's suspicion is that Jonathan harbors feelings for Michelle, a notion that sounds bizarre, but Michelle offers further explanation. For context, Michelle admits to not having a close bond with her parents or sister. She began to distance herself from them upon starting college, not due to any significant conflict, but simply because she felt different. Since leaving for her studies, Michelle rarely spent time at home, opting to travel or visit her grandparents during breaks, finding it more agreeable than the unease she felt at home. The core issue is that Michelle feels fundamentally different from her sister and parents. They never seem to connect, with her family showing little interest in her pursuits. Whenever Michelle shared her interests, they would listen passively before redirecting the conversation back to their own interests. This lack of engagement led Michelle to stop trying to connect. What hurts Michelle the most is her family's lack of effort to reach out as she drifted away. They seemed content with her withdrawal, almost as if they were relieved. This reinforced her belief that she did not belong with them. Over time, she limited her visits to significant events like birthdays and holidays, still feeling like an outsider. The conversations were always polite, but lacked depth and warmth. Emily and Michelle never had the typical close sisterly relationship. Emily was always the favored child, excelling in ways that pleased their parents and fitting in seamlessly. Michelle, in contrast, felt like the odd one out. While her family members aren't inherently bad people, their subtle digs at her made her feel belittled. Eventually, Michelle found it easier to minimize contact with them, avoiding situations where she felt out of place. The situation became complicated when Jonathan joined them for Christmas dinner last year. For the first time in a long while, Michelle didn't feel completely invisible. Her family had a way of making her feel like she didn't belong, but Jonathan treated her differently. He was kind and engaged in conversation with her like a normal person, discussing various everyday topics. Initially, Michelle didn't think much of it, attributing it to basic politeness. However, Emily seemed deeply disturbed by this interaction. Despite the innocuous nature of the conversations between Michelle and Jonathan, Emily was visibly uncomfortable. She later confronted Michelle, accusing her of trying to steal Jonathan, claiming Michelle had always been jealous of her. Michelle was taken aback by this accusation, as it seemed to come out of nowhere. She dismissed Emily's concerns as foolish, but Emily remained fixated on the idea that Michelle was overly friendly with Jonathan and that he was acting differently around her. Michelle had always known Emily to be the center of attention, adored by their parents as the perfect child. But accusing Michelle of trying to steal her fiancé was a new low. Michelle tried to ignore the situation, assuming Emily was just feeling insecure or anxious. However, after that night, things became tense among them. Emily became even more distant, avoiding Michelle and giving curt responses when spoken to. During family gatherings, she would cling to Jonathan, almost as if to stake her claim. Jonathan, on the other hand, continued to behave normally, remaining polite and friendly. What truly bothers me, I suppose, is how readily my family sided with Emily. There were hints, but no one directly addressed the issue with me. My mother would cast strange glances my way whenever Emily and Jonathan were around. My father, typically quite detached, started emphasizing the importance of relationships and family support, all very passive-aggressively. The more I pondered it, the angrier I became. I've never been one to get involved in others' drama, especially not my sister's. Why would I suddenly develop an interest in Emily's fiancé when we hardly interact outside of family events? It made no sense. I learned of Emily's engagement a few months later from my grandparents. Yes, I wasn't even directly informed about my own sister's engagement. Discovering this from my grandparents felt like a blow, even though I didn't expect a grand, personalized announcement. It was the sort of confirmation that validated my feelings about my family's indifference towards me. I guess I held on to a faint hope that, despite the tension and distance, she would still consider me a part of this major life event. We're sisters after all, I thought. We may not be close, but I'm still family. That was evidently too much to expect. When I found out about the engagement, I remained silent to Emily. Initially, I rationalized that she might have forgotten to tell me, or was simply overwhelmed with wedding planning. I was still, for some reason, giving her the benefit of the doubt, even though I know it sounds naive. I assumed she would eventually call or at least send a last-minute invitation. However, days turned into weeks, and there was no communication. Then, I received an unexpected call from Emily. We hadn't really spoken since that bizarre accusation at Christmas, so I was surprised to see her name on my phone. I answered, trying to sound casual, as if my own sister hadn't completely disregarded me. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, she delivered the news. "I'm not inviting you to the wedding." I was momentarily speechless, processing her words. Even though I wasn't particularly keen on going, hearing her say it aloud still stung. When I asked for a reason, she provided the most absurd explanation. "I don't want you there because Jonathan has feelings for you. It will simply be uncomfortable." I had to laugh, a genuine laugh. It was so unbelievable that this was even happening. Jonathan has no feelings for me, and even if he did, I wouldn't have interrupted the ceremony to profess my undying love for him. It was so ridiculous that I didn't even want to argue. I simply said, "Have a great wedding and happy marriage," and hung up. Whether or not I was part of her special day didn't truly matter to me, as I didn't need that drama in my life. Honestly, we weren't close. Emily and I existed in entirely different spheres, and I had long accepted that. However, I needed to vent and perhaps gain some external perspective. Am I the only one who finds this entire situation absurd? Has anyone experienced something similar? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. I need to document this while it's still vivid, as yesterday was utterly chaotic. Emily's rehearsal dinner turned into a complete disaster, and I was somehow dragged into the middle of it. My phone started blowing up while I was having a typical Thursday evening, engrossed in my laptop and working on an assignment. I initially chose to ignore it, as I've become quite skilled at that lately. However, within 10 minutes, I had 7 missed calls from my dad. My dad never calls repeatedly. He's the type to assume you're busy if you don't answer immediately and will try again later. 7 calls meant there was definitely an issue. When I finally answered, he sounded frantic, unlike anyone I'd ever heard before. "Michelle, you need to come to the venue immediately," he repeated, sounding like a broken record. "Right now." When I asked what was happening, he simply said, "It's about Jonathan and Emily. Just come, please." His desperation was slightly alarming, but here's the thing. Did they genuinely believe I would drop everything and rush to their aid after all the drama, accusations, and exclusion from the wedding? I told him exactly that. "Remember, Dad, I'm not invited to this wedding." Emily was quite clear about that. "Michelle, please," he implored. "Jonathan is refusing to go through with the wedding without you there." That stopped me in my tracks. What? Before I could process that bombshell, my phone buzzed with another call, this time from Mom. When I switched over, she was sobbing, truly sobbing. She kept repeating, "Your sister needs you," as if she had forgotten how they had all treated me over the past few months. It was strange to hear her crying about sisterly love and family loyalty when they had been perfectly fine without me until things went south. Then Emily called, in a state, barely coherent. Apparently, Jonathan showed up for the rehearsal dinner and immediately asked where I was. When Emily told him I wasn't invited, he lost it, but in a more subdued, disappointed way than outright anger. He declared that he couldn't marry someone who would treat their own sister in such a way, in front of their friends, the wedding party, and both families. Recounting it, Emily sobbed into the phone. He claimed that after observing their treatment of me, he couldn't be a member of a family that would reject someone in such a way. "I was just like Mom and Dad," he stated, adding that he didn't want to be around such poisonous behavior. If I'm being honest, A significant portion of me felt validated. At last, someone had witnessed what I had endured for years. In fact, someone had spoken up and declared that it was unacceptable. Emily wasn't finished, though. In between sobbing, she began outlining this intricate plan for me to visit the location and explained that there was only a major misunderstanding and that I was the one who decided not to attend the wedding, claiming that it was entirely my idea. She persisted in repeating, "We can fix this. Simply come and inform Jonathan that you have no intention of attending the wedding. Inform him that you were never left out. Michelle, please, I can't let him go." It was all breathtakingly audacious. It's absurd that after months of treating me like a man-stealing villain and being told outright that I wasn't allowed at her wedding because her fiancé might be attracted to me, she wanted me to lie in order to keep her connection intact, after making me feel like trash in my own family. I let her cry on the other end of the line for a long time without saying anything. Then, as coolly as I could, I said, "I won't lie for you, Emily. You are now dealing with the repercussions of your decisions to ignore me and treat me as though I didn't exist. Fixing it is not my responsibility." "But he'll hear you out." She almost let out a scream. "He believes in you." I answered, "Perhaps he trusts me because I've never given him a reason not to. Perhaps he has doubts about your true identity because of anything he perceives in the way you have treated me. In any case, I won't be attending the event, and I won't tell lies to improve your reputation." She was still complaining when I hung up. I then made myself a cup of tea, switched off my phone entirely, and took a seat to truly think about what had just transpired. My phone continued to light up with notifications over the course of the following several hours. I examined it and found voicemails from my parents, missed calls from Emily's pals, and texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. The entire family seemed to have banded together to try to coerce me into cleaning up Emily's mess. But, what do you know, for the first time in my life, I was very sure that avoiding them was the proper thing to do. Jonathan alone had been able to see through their actions, not because of anything I said or did, but because of how they treated me. He had come to that conclusion, and to be honest, that seemed like the fullest confirmation I could have hoped for. Last night, I went to bed without using my phone, and I slept better than I have in months. For once, let them handle the consequences of their own behavior. I'm done cleaning up other people's crap and being the family scapegoat. My grandparents, who are the only relatives I still communicate with, informed me this morning that Jonathan is not returning calls from Emily or my parents. It seems that he has informed his family that the wedding is definitively off. My parents are working feverishly to contain the damage. Emily is inconsolable, and I'm just sitting here at last content with my choice to keep my distance. I realize this is lengthy, but I had to say it all. I appreciate all of the comments on my previous post that affirmed my choice to keep my distance from my family. You were right. Sometimes it's best to take a back seat and let others deal with the fallout from their own behavior. Update 2. Many of you inquired about my early years and the reasons behind my prolonged estrangement from my family. Since it's a somewhat weighty story, I didn't delve into it in my first post. But in light of recent events, I believe this is a good moment to explore some of it. The problem is that I suffer from social anxiety. I always had the feeling that something was wrong with me as a child, but I was never able to articulate it. However, my parents were traditionalists who thought mental health conditions were merely pretexts. They would frequently say things like, "You need to toughen up," or "You're just being dramatic." They would label me weak or lazy if I ever showed signs of anxiety or a panic attack, as if I was choosing to feel that way. When I look back, I can see a lot of warning signs. I had this big presentation for English class when I was 15. The thought of standing in front of 30 students was a recipe for a social anxiety disorder. I had trouble sleeping the night before, and I felt physically ill the morning of. I begged to stay at home and informed my parents. My father's reaction: "Your nervousness won't cause life to stop. Quit making a huge deal out of everything." I ultimately experienced a severe panic attack in front of the class. My voice began breaking. Some children even started chuckling, and my hands were shaking so much that I was unable to grip my notes. The room seemed to be whirling, but I was unable to go out. Rather than offering consolation, my mother simply remarked, "See, you made it through." All that drama was in vain. Everything was made worse by Emily, who was the ideal sister. Cess, data accuracy, tone, style, and core message, while using synonyms and varied grammatical structures and keeping the narrative in English. Anxiety gripped her during large social events with her friends. People would often comment that I was the peculiar sibling who remained secluded in her room. I once overheard Emily telling her friends, "Yeah, she's just antisocial. She thinks she's too good for everyone." My life took a turn when I started college. My first semester was an absolute disaster. Being away from home, adapting to new social settings, and trying to manage my anxiety while attending classes became overwhelming. I remember feeling like I was suffocating while sitting in my dorm room, struggling to breathe. My roommate, bless her heart, noticed something was seriously wrong and practically dragged me to the college counseling center. Dr. Martinez was the first person who genuinely listened to me. She didn't pressure me to toughen up or downplay my feelings. Instead, she helped me understand my situation. After a few sessions, Dr. Martinez recommended I see a psychiatrist for an accurate diagnosis. It was like finally naming the monster I had been fighting my entire life. Receiving that diagnosis of social anxiety disorder was a revelation. It wasn't about seeking attention or being dramatic, as my family had always claimed. It was a real condition, and more importantly, it was treatable. The therapy sessions were eye-opening. Dr. Martinez explained that my family's behavior was not just unsupportive, but also intentionally harmful. She advised me on setting boundaries, self-advocacy, and recognizing toxic patterns. That's when I began to deliberately distance myself from my family. What really frustrates me is that my parents completely dismissed my diagnosis when I tried to explain it to them. "These doctors are just trying to make money by labeling everything a disease," my mother said dismissively. "You're just using big words to justify your antisocial behavior," Emily added, rolling her eyes. I made one last attempt to clarify things last Thanksgiving before the whole wedding issue began. I had prepared an entire presentation on social anxiety, complete with research and statistics. "Michelle, when are you going to stop making excuses and start living in the real world?" My dad interrupted mid-sentence. It hit me then that they would never change. They would never try to understand. They had a fixed image of me as the difficult child, the dramatic one, the problem. And you know what? Realizing that was strangely liberating. It made it easier for me to stop seeking their understanding or approval. Looking back, I see how this pattern directly contributed to the wedding situation. My parents' quick acceptance of Emily's version without question, and Emily's immediate assumption that I was after her fiancé. It's all part of their long-held belief that I'm the troublemaker who needs to be controlled. Jonathan saw through this. He observed how they treated me, how they minimized my feelings, and how they used me as a scapegoat for everything, and he called it out for what it was: toxic behavior. Unlike everyone else in my family's social circle who just accepted their version of reality. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this wedding drama wasn't an isolated incident. It's the culmination of years of family dynamics where I was consistently painted as the villain, the problem child, the one who needed fixing. Maybe that's why Jonathan's choice feels so validating. Someone finally saw what I've been experiencing for years. Yes, that's the background many of you asked for. It explains why I'm not in a hurry to mend fences right now. I've spent too many years trying to change how my family sees me, to get their understanding, and to gain their approval. I'm done with that. Accepting that some people, even family members, will never understand or accept you is sometimes the healthiest thing you can do. Update 3. A month has passed since everything went sideways, and now I must share the final part of this story. At least now I can say that what started as a wedding drama is truly over, though it has morphed into something I never could have anticipated. Emily lost everything when her wedding was canceled. She somehow got my new phone number and shared it with everyone she knew. I was suddenly flooded with hundreds of hateful messages from strangers, her acquaintances, and distant relatives. The threats ranged from guilt-tripping to outright intimidation. The vandalism followed. Classic Emily, who used to do this to girls she disliked in high school, was the first to leave eggs on my car. She escalated when that didn't get the desired response. I can't even count how many times I found my mailbox vandalized, my car damaged, or my apartment door covered in offensive notes. The last straw was when she slashed all 4 of my car tires and left a threatening note in her distinctive handwriting. Throughout all this, my parents deliberately chose to ignore Emily's actions. Girls will be girls, or you need to be more understanding of your sister's pain, was their standard response to every incident. They dismissed it as Emily just wanting to talk, even after I showed them security camera footage of her trying to break into my apartment. However, I was prepared, thanks to this incredible Reddit community, especially those who suggested I install security cameras and document everything. You pointed out that this was more than just family drama. It was criminal harassment and vandalism. With witness testimonies, video evidence, photographs, and hundreds of threatening messages, we built a strong case. Emily eventually understood she had taken things too far when my attorney presented our evidence along with a cease and desist letter. Her attempted break-in, captured on security footage, was particularly incriminating. She tried to negotiate through her lawyer, offering to cover the damages if I dropped the case. However, I refused. This was about accountability and consequences, not money. The court case moved forward swiftly and decisively. Emily faced charges for attempted breaking and entering, criminal harassment, and vandalism. She received a permanent restraining order, mandatory therapy, and a 1-year suspended sentence. The judge was particularly Kithor due to the intentional nature of her actions and the substantial evidence of her escalating behavior. My parents' reaction to the verdict was predictable. They accused me of being heartless, of ruining your sister's life over a few pranks. In fact, they suggested I simply move away if I felt unsafe, after I informed them that Emily had repeatedly harassed me, damaged my property, and tried to break into my home. I never intended to communicate with them again after that. A settlement was reached out of court in the civil case. In addition to covering the damages for emotional distress and lost wages, Emily had to compensate for all the harm she had caused. Her social media harassment campaign had cost me several freelance jobs. More significantly, the settlement included a non-contact clause preventing our parents from acting as intermediaries or flying monkeys. According to my lawyer, Emily and my parents' concerns about their reputations were instrumental in the quick settlement. It seems their worry over the opinions of their country club friends outweighs their concern for doing what's right. Since then, I've moved to a new apartment in a secure building with constant surveillance. My social media profiles have been deactivated, my contact information has been completely updated, and my clients have been incredibly understanding about the situation. Someone who learned about my ordeal and was impressed by how I handled it even offered me a job. The most unexpected outcome of all this is that, for the first time in my life, I feel liberated. I'm not burdened by my family's expectations and criticisms. I'm no longer the scapegoat. I'm just Michelle, building my own life on my own terms. I'm neither the dramatic nor the difficult child. My life was genuinely transformed by the Reddit community, who supported me through everything in court. Your advice on documentation and security measures was vital. When I began to doubt myself, your encouraging words kept me going, and your stories of similar experiences made me realize I wasn't alone. Remember, sharing DNA doesn't give someone the right to mistreat you. If you're dealing with toxic family members, sometimes the healthiest action is to walk away and let them face the consequences of their actions. It's about setting boundaries and demanding respect, not about getting even. With therapy, my social anxiety is improving, though it's still present. It turns out that a significant portion of it was linked to the constant criticism and gaslighting I experienced during my childhood. Who would have thought that removing toxic individuals could be such an effective treatment? I won't be providing any more updates now that this chapter of my life is truly closed. I'm focusing on my education, career, and creating a new network of chosen family for support. I want to thank everyone who supported me and followed my story. You gave me the courage to leave and the strength to advocate for myself. They say living well is the best revenge. I'd add that the best closure is knowing you finally stood up for yourself. I'm done being a scapegoat or a victim. I've taken control of my life and won't ever look back. Reddit, thank you for everything, and goodbye. Thank you for reading. If you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.